Again, in the absence of the gavel, I'll just call September 15th meeting. The September 15th meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission is called to order. Dan, would you please take the roll call?
Sure. Chair Clark.
Present.
Vice Chair McCann.
Present.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan.
Present.
Commissioner Friedman.
Present.
Commissioner Garrett.
Present.
Commissioner Gauthier.
Present.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
And Commissioner Futterman has an excused absence. She won't make it tonight. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to welcome the commissioners, staff members, and visitors to the commission meeting tonight. If there are visitors there, would you please identify yourselves? Give us your names for the record. I know we have Viva Hoffman, who's one of our presenters.
That's me.
Is there anyone else?
Hello.
Yes.
My name is Georgia Severite. I'm from Clean Cities, Coachella Valley region, and I'm sitting in on the meeting today.
Great. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Hi, Chair. This is David Noel with the Planning Department.
Hi, David. Thanks for joining us. There will be time for public comments later in the meeting. I'd just like to ask that participants please keep your microphones muted during the meeting, and then raise your hand to be called to speak at the appropriate times, and then unmute your microphones when you speak. And please do not use the chat feature in Zoom.
How do you unmute your microphone? Oh, I see. Mine says mute right now.
You can just click on that.
Okay.
The next item is the acceptance of the agenda. The agenda was emailed and posted last Thursday, September 10th, which is per city policy. Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
This is Carl, so moved.
Second.
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 By whom? Greg?
Lonnie.
Lanny.
Lonnie.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm seconding it.
Is there any discussion about the agenda? Okay, all in favor of accepting the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no.
Aye.
Thank you. The agenda has been accepted. Now we'll move on to the next item in the agenda, which is staff comments. Patrick.
Okay. Thank you. So I did prepare a little update summary for you all, but I have updates to the update on just about everything. So let me just hit a couple of highlights. For the past and upcoming council meeting topics, the foodware ordinance is being removed from the September 24th meeting agenda per Christy Holstage's request. So more to follow on that when we talk about that topic. The October 7th meeting, in addition to the recycling and organics management ordinance, I think we'll also try to put forward the climate action discussion pending a confirmation on this call. And then the demo garden will also likely move forward. That presentation was made to the landscape subcommittee of the Airport Commission yesterday. They agreed to forward it on, recommended forwarding it on to the Airport Commission to basically recommend that it go forward to council. So, so that's making progress. And I think those were the two big updates I have for you based on what's there. So any questions on those topics or anything else you need to be updated on? Lonnie.
I'm an avid gardener and I've survived this last summer, but it has made me question what plants will be appropriate in the desert in the future. And so I'm a little concerned about what's been chosen so far.
Right. Yeah, so the plant choosing is going to commence after the concept goes forward to council. So that'll be an interesting conversation as we get warmer here in the desert. So, and also just a total side note on that topic, if you guys have citrus trees and they look like they're kind of dying, sometimes they often kind of die off in the summer, get kind of dried up. But there is a blight going around. And so if your branches are starting to die and the fruit's starting to die, then that's a problem. So you should get that checked out. And I think we've got 3 trees that are potentially not going to make it. Okay, any other questions, comments? All right. So that's it for staff comments at the moment.
And those items are covered in the memo that you provided in the packet. So now we'll move on to public comments. This is time for members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. The Commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. So other than our presentations, we do have one visitor tonight. Do we have any public comments? Hearing none, then we'll move on to the presentations. The first presentation is on an overview of the update of the Palm Springs General Plan, and we have David Newell here from Planning to give us that overview. David?
Yes, good evening, Chair and Sustainability Commissioners. Glad to be here tonight and give you just a kind of an overview of what we're doing with the General Plan update. And thank the subcommittee who helped provide some feedback on where we're at right now in the process. So let me pull up my screen here. Oh, Patrick, can I share my screen? It says it's locked. Ah, there we go. Okay.
So I made you host, so you just have to make me host back.
Okay. Do you see the full slide, or do you see the slide with the notes?
Slide with the notes.
Okay, I'll have to switch this back. Okay. Full screen, or is it the slide with the frames still?
Full screen.
Okay, great. Okay, so just to give you an overview, what we're doing with the update is it's a limited update to the general plan. The general plan was adopted in 2007. The council approved as a part of the budget appropriations last year an update to certain elements of the general plan, some things that needed to be cleaned up as a part of our land development district ad hoc recommendations, subcommittee recommendations to address some things that need to be cleaned up. So we've begun the process. We started late last year. And what we're focusing on with this limited update is the land use element, the circulation element, the housing element, and actually the safety element. The safety element wasn't anticipated to be updated initially, and that's what you see here in the table. It shows the safety element was anticipated to have no revisions, but with some state law changes, we are actually, in fact, going to be updating that. So we've amended the budget to cover that. As far as the timeline, I've listed here, we have 5 steps to get through this process. It's roughly about 18-month process. And that will be delayed given some of the hiccups we've had this year with COVID. But right now we're just finishing up confirming our vision and priorities. And that we did get some feedback from the Sustainability Subcommittee on those priorities that are related to sustainability. And so we appreciate that. And I'll kind of give you just an overview of those changes too. But this is really kind of where we're at. We're just finishing up step one. The Planning Commission reviewed the subcommittee's recommendations as well as the changes that they had reviewed back on July 29th this past week on September 9th. And they recommended approval to the City Council, incorporating all of the recommendations from the subcommittee of the sustainability. So that will go forward to the City Council, and the Council will review that on, we're looking at the first meeting in October, on October 8th. And after that, we'll jump into the next steps, which are updating the goals and policies and preparing all of the updates to the elements, administrative updates, minor changes to the rest of the elements, and then doing the environmental review, and finally adoption of the general plan. So taking a look at some of the changes that are addressing sustainability, the original priority that was identified back in 2007 that probably touched on sustainability the most was the second priority that was listed. And again, these, I should just mention, these priorities are not ranked in order. They all have equal weight. So there are 10 priorities that were part of, there's the vision and priority that were kind of really the foundation of all goals and policies for the general plan in 2007. So the second priority that we had listed was to establish the city as a leader in efficient use of resources. So the Planning Commission took the subcommittee's recommendation for updating this 2007 priority to what you see here on the right. So it's really moving it away from establishing this program, and because obviously we've done a lot of efforts in the field of sustainability with obviously establishing the Sustainability Office, the Sustainability Commission. So we've done a lot of the programs, a lot of the efforts that we've done. Now we're looking to continue that as we update this priority for the general plan update. And so the commission did recommend basically what was recommended by the Sustainability Subcommittee. The next priority that was recommended for a minor change was related to priority number 3. And in this priority, there was some minor changes to how the words were written for promoting businesses that will provide a living wage. There was a minor change that the commission had to that, but the rest of it was all recommended to the City Council, as you see here on the right. Priority number 5 was the next one that the subcommittee looked at, and then they added the words, as you see in the second line, encourage development of resource efficient housing units. So resource efficient housing is important, of course, and so that was part of the minor change that the subcommittee had for the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission agreed and moved that forward. Priority number 6, related to strengthening, fostering community interaction and engagement by you having unique places. So the Sustainability Subcommittee recommended that the words improve parks and other open spaces be included. So that was recommended to the to the City Council by the Planning Commission. Priority number 9. This one had the subcommittee added the words "and public transportation," as you see here on the right. Obviously, were a lot more changes that were incorporated to this priority that the General Plan Steering Committee had as it went to Planning Commission, and so there were some additional changes that the Commission had, and then the subcommittee had here. So those have been incorporated, and that is being forwarded to the City Council for consideration. And then lastly, priority number 10, this one was kind of worded a little bit funny after we had some revisions that were recommended. So based on the subcommittee's recommendation, we took out a few words to make it read a little bit better. And so that was recommended to the City Council, as you see here on the right. And of course, there are other priorities, but those were not addressed by the subcommittee. Again, this process, and I should the process is we have a general plan who is making recommendations, and that steering committee is made up of members, a member from each district, each council district. It also includes a sustainability commissioner, and it also includes the planning commission chair, and then a member of the tribe, the tribal planning office. And then so that committee is making recommendations to the planning commission as part of this process. They've already held 3 meetings to address the vision and priority changes, and their recommendations were based on a survey that we had open to the public as a part of our early outreach efforts in this process, and our community forum that we had back in February. So it's really to get the community's input as part of this process, and get their feedback as to what the values are. As we do our updates to the general plan, we'll actually have another community forum here in the fall. How that will look, we're still working on how we're going to handle that. I expect it would be some sort of online forum that we'll be looking for input on the chapters that we're updating, the elements of the general plan. So that'll be upcoming. I always want to recommend to people that they visit psgeneralplan.com. That's the website we've created dedicated to this process. It has all the latest information with respect to upcoming meetings, past meetings, documents that we are preparing and providing as a part of the update. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Happy to answer any questions that the commission has.
Chair Clark, I have a question for David. So David, when you mentioned the safety element having to be updated because of the change in state law, I assume you're referring to SB 379, which requires that the safety element cover climate, along here, climate change adaptation and resilience. So is that what you'll be working on the safety plan, and sort of where does that fit in the step plan?
Yeah, so it'll be all part of those kind of cleanup items that we're trying to address as a part of changes to state law. Climate resiliency being one of them, high fire hazard areas, just a number of things that we're going to be incorporating as a part of updates to that document. So it'll all be part of the things that we're looking at as we get more into the specifics of each element after the council approves the vision and priorities, and really gives us the overall picture of the values of the city before we kind of get into those policy updates.
Okay, so that's part of the administrative, that section's part of it. That will be covered under the administrative. I think it was step 3 in your slide. So that section, those parts will be covered. That's subject to me and the administrative update, the administrative.
Yeah, and if of course during the specific policy updates that we're looking at, if there's things that would make sense to include at that point, then yeah, absolutely we would like to make sure we address those before we get into the administrative portions of it too.
Okay, that's one of the reasons, sort of anticipating that's one of the reasons from the language that I sent, which was reflected now in priority 2, that talks about climate adaptation and mitigation. So that's kind of the hook for the more detailed work in that part of the safety element. So just make sure the two of them sort of tied together. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for David?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jim.
Maybe this is kind of far along, David, to even bring this up, but in one of the slides, we talk about promoting alternative transportation. And then a couple slides down, we talk about support businesses and provide plenty of parking for cars. Palm Springs is still one of the very few cities I know that has a multi-level parking garage that's free. I'm wondering if it's too late to put in something about pricing our parking in order to encourage public or alternative transportation, or is that a little too far out?
That would be something I think we would get into as a part of our policy decisions when we're looking at maybe the circulation element and those specific policies that address parking in the city.
Okay.
So yeah, the vision and priorities are really the high level kind of general foundation for making other decisions. Or establishing policies or updating the policies that we currently have in the general plan. And that would be more of a lower level item that is really a policy decision that we would have to make and address in the policy, goals and policies of the general plan.
Jim, hi, this is Carl. So the City Council looked into this 2 years ago regarding parking. Part of the decision was to use that space underneath the Hyatt. I always get Hyatt and Hilton mixed up. The one on Plum Canyon. And the additional parking space the city purchased underneath the to be completed before my death, Andy's Hotel. And also looking at the parking situation north of Palm Springs for like Trio and 849, where there isn't enough parking for staff. So parking is part of the long-term vision, and not even just for tourists, but also for employees who come in to work in the restaurants and hotel industry.
Yeah, and what I would say that I think the specific change that was relative to ensuring adequate parking, I think it was related to the concern of the arena and having parking flood out into neighborhoods. So while it's not specific there, we're just saying, you know, we don't want to have, I think generally we want to make sure that if we're doing land use planning, that we're making sure that our city is parked.
I guess my concern is as long as the parking is free, we'll need unlimited amounts. And once we start charging for parking, we'll need less parking.
Yeah.
So I'm just astonished that we still do the multi-level parking garage is still free. So
Santa Monica does it, Jim.
What?
Parking's free in Santa Monica.
I have never seen a free lot in Santa Monica. I've only paid in Santa Monica.
No, they're free.
Okay. I still am opposed to free parking. So I think subsidizing automobiles is not the right approach in our sustainability plan or our green guidelines too. So.
Yeah, and that's something, like I said, once we start getting into this, the policy and goals and policies of each chapter, you know, we're looking for feedback. So as we get further along here in the next few months, we'll send a link out for the surveys and the meetings if you're interested. And on psgeneralplan.com, we have an area where you can subscribe to receive updates for meetings, and anytime we have a survey, we'll let you know as a part of subscribing to that website.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, for your presentation. Could you provide your charts to Dan and Patrick so that they can send them to the commission members?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Go ahead.
Could you provide your charts to Dan and Patrick so they could send them to the commissioners?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Nice.
Dave.
Moving on. The next presentation is on safety issues for the 5G network. And how this came about was that Janet, also known as Viva Hoffman, sent an email to Mayor Kors expressing some concerns about the 5G network. Mayor Kors forwarded that email to Patrick and me, and I subsequently contacted Viva and asked her to make a presentation tonight. So we'll move on to her presentation. Viva?
Hey, can you hear me? Or do I have to click on the mute thing?
We can hear you.
You're good.
Okay. All right, so I've been studying this 5G thing, and I'm afraid that beautiful brittle bush in Andreas Canyon will be gone because the bees will finally go all together with the 5G. We've already lost 80% of bees. The yucca will be gone, the Joshua trees will be gone because the bats pollinate them. The hummingbirds will be gone, which won't be fun because we like to watch them, and the land values will sink 10 to 20%. Now, the Navy has known about all these side effects since 1972 when they reported them. So they've probably known about them since 1970, along with the Russians in 1960, because the Germans used it in World War II. The Navy has 122 adverse health effects. The Germans were able to fry eyeballs and disperse crowds, the Nazis, with the 5G electromagnetic shortwave frequency. And we can get cataracts, we can get ocular melanoma. There's DNA damage, especially to the DNA of female embryos, which means it's permanent. The DNA will go on generation after generation until the end of time. Meanwhile, the sperm swimmers are going in circles right now from 2, 3, and 4G, so who knows what they're gonna do next. So let's go on to head and neck tumors, heart disease, cell damage. The cell walls get damaged. The oxygen uptake is slowed way down in your blood, which surprisingly enough is a COVID-19 symptom also. And then my favorite thing is our millions of sweat glands are going to act as antennas for the shortwave electromagnetic 5G thing that has the pulsations going on it. That's the information that's really, really, really fast. And the studies that have been done so far have never studied the pulsations, which are the worst things. Okay, so I'm thinking that, I guess I didn't say this yet, my favorite horrible thing is all of our sweat glands acting as antennas, letting the waves come into our body. We have billions of sweat glands. And then we'll be like batteries. Our body will be like batteries because this thing, these satellites are right now about 30,000. They're gonna go to 50,000 at least. Then they go down to these antenna terminals, which bring in the information from antennas that are spaced every 100 or 200 meters, like in front of your next door house, probably. And then if they put the military weapons into the LED streetlights, like they're doing in a section of the UK in London, they can go through cement and brick. And during the war, the Germans bragged they can put words in your brain. So the companies that are distributing it are using the FCC guidelines from 1996, and these blue lines, they say, are, you know, going into your body, and they're only going to go a couple of millimeters, but nobody's upgraded the whole thing since 1996. The FCC says they don't care. This company here says the mobile 5G devices the human body may pose a problem, believe it or not. The human body is electric, just like the Earth and the atmosphere. And here's a photograph of an office building with the beautiful 5G micromillimeter waves zooming out, which if you could see is what they'd look like. Now these LED street lights, as I said, here's a photograph of them in China, lining the street. So we don't know, From Brussels to Bangladesh and from Mill Valley to New York State, there are cities, counties, and countries that have already banned it. or said, let's find, you know, further, let's do further safety studies. But wait a minute, I forgot bone and bone marrow problems, Alzheimer's, autism, ADHD, Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's, diabetes, and then the usual insomnia, anxiety, depression, blah, blah, blah. So I say, let's go to fiber optics instead of electromagnetic waves, because no harm from fiber optics and it's cheaper besides. And maybe that's what these other cities are doing. I don't know. Anyway, that's it, the end. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? And I'll start with a question. Are you talking about the 5G network in general, which is already in development? Are you talking about networks which are being developed as part of smart cities?
Yeah, exactly, yes. Yes. So you'll know when your baby's diaper is wet, when your refrigerator is empty, when it needs milk, the electric cars, which can't tell a pedestrian from a bag of garbage in the street, by the way, sometimes.
So that's the development you're talking about.
Yeah, smart cities. Right now, there's no 5G in Palm Springs, right? There wasn't the last time I checked. I'd been in Altadena for a while, and in my daughter's house, until the smoke from the Bobcat fire drove me back home. And she said, we have no 5G here, but I looked at the map and they do. T-Mobile has a 5G network. We already have smart meters here, which make your ears ring. I mean, they make mine ring, maybe they don't make yours, but smart meters are already not a great idea. And the smart city will just be bathed in these electromagnetic frequencies, which are shorter than the 4G. It's a whole new, it's a military weapon is what it is.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I just have one question, which is, do you know specifically what the different frequency is for 5G compared to 4G?
I just know that it's a shorter wave, and I don't know exactly what different frequency it's on compared to 4G.
Okay, thank you.
That's why they have to put antennas every 100 to 200 meters, because it's a shorter wave. And the shorter waves are 10 to 100 times more powerful than the longer waves, which is 4G. Like 5G is a totally different thing altogether. But I'm not an expert on frequencies. You know, there's radio waves, you know, there's radiation coming off everything. It's really, you really need to be, I'm sorry, I'm not an engineer. You know, I'm sorry, I've been researching this for about a month now, and I still have a lot to learn.
Anybody else with a question or comment? Jim? Thank you, Viva, for your presentation tonight.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Now we'll move on. Item in the agenda is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from the July 21st meeting. The minutes were emailed and posted last Thursday, September 10th. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
I move to accept.
I'll second.
Second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? So all in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstain? Abstention? The minutes have been accepted. Thank you. Now we'll move on to old business. And the first item is the disposable foodware and plastic waste reduction ordinance and outreach. Patrick.
All right. I'm sort of feeling like old business today, so it's been a very long day. So wanted to chat a little bit about the status of the proposed ordinance for disposable foodware and plastics waste reduction. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, we did some additional outreach. And hang on one second. So I've been monitoring the the 1PS meeting, and I can't seem to get into their website, so I won't be talking at the 1PS meeting. So anyway, so the ordinance, we had some stakeholder meetings this month, the end of August, at the beginning of September. We also went to the Palm Springs Hospitality Association meeting to talk about it there, as well as the general managers meeting, which is affiliated with the Hospitality Association. So we shared information about the ordinance at each of those different meetings. There were a few questions, but we really didn't get into a big discussion at those meetings. For the most part, the feedback that we got from most of the businesses was that they don't have the bandwidth to do any of this right now. And so we're not super receptive to the different elements of the ordinance, although a lot of them are doing these things already. So there were a few people on that like Las Casuelas, who's been thinking about this for a long time and has already switched away from some of their plastic disposable foodware. So anyway, so we didn't get a lot of participation in the actual stakeholder meetings. There were about 3 or 4 restaurants that participated, a couple of members of the public. And so we get a little bit of feedback, but again, it wasn't very robust feedback. And then at the council meeting last week, council member Holstich suggested that we remove it from the agenda for September 24th and postpone that discussion pending more outreach to public. And so I'm not sure what that looks like or what it is that we will do differently moving forward, but that's where we stand right now. But I did want to kind of walk through it a little bit to highlight a few things that I did to the ordinance in response to some of the feedback that we did hear. So I wanted to share a couple of those things with you. So the first thing was that we wanted to, or I put the effective date as July 1st of 2021. That's a little bit later than I think that council would have hoped. But my thinking behind that was twofold. So one is to avoid some sort of a stepped or phased in approach, but rather to have the full thing implementable whenever it's ready to go on the effective date. And that's one piece of advice that we received from other cities who tried to do phased or tiered approaches. So what we thought was we would do the full effective date and the full ordinance on the effective date. And so, so I set it at July 1st because that would give us a chance to actually do some outreach to businesses, establish some technical assistance, hire some technical assistant support staff, and actually move that forward. So, so anyway, so that's what I put down as the potential effective date. And then the other thing was I actually just cleaned up a little bit of the definitions related to compostable material because they were a little bit repetitious in a couple of places or redundant in a couple of places, so I fixed that. The other thing that I did, the other big change to the ordinance itself was to the description of the fee for disposable foodware. So one of the pieces of feedback that we did get, and this started actually with council asking this question about, you know, how does that fee for disposable foodware work? And, you know, doesn't that seem, you know, that seems a little strange, and shouldn't we be providing incentives for people to use reusable foodware? So what I did, and actually the philosophy behind it, as I think you probably know, is that if basically the stick works better than the carrot in these particular cases. So fees actually drive behavior more than incentives do. And so what I did was I included a fee for the reusable foodware or an incentive that was less expensive than the alternative, making reusables less expensive than disposables. So I thought a little bit about how to word that because it gets a little bit strange when you think about you can't just say that there's an incentive or a reduced price for using reusables or free refills or whatever that may be, because if people are going to subscribe to a reusable cup or reusable container service, there's probably a fee for that, and they may want to collect some of that fee. So I put in there just that it was less expensive than the disposable alternative. So hopefully that gives people a lot of room and a lot of flexibility in terms of various things that they might do or not do to promote reusable foodware. So that was also in there. And then I think those are really the two big changes that I put forward. Otherwise, the only other piece of or the only other comment that I received that may result in some change to the ordinance is there was some concern expressed about not having a plastic bag for liquid food transport. So that's currently an exception in our plastic bag ordinance. But again, we did not include that exception here. So we just said no single-use plastic bags, just the same way we do for groceries. So again, that may be a subject of discussion for council as it goes forward if we do get more comments on that. But that's one thing that we did here. Carl, did you have a question?
What's an example of liquid food?
So it would be like a soup.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you get a soup or something saucy, then that's really what they're talking about.
Thank you.
Yes.
Although I did think of something this week. I was at the grocery store, and lots of prepackaged stuff are in those disgusting shell cases.
Shells.
Yep.
Tons of stuff. I mean, we have no control over that because those are national manufacturers. But it's so abundant, it's almost not worth arguing with restaurants when the consumer is going to run to Rouse and buy 10 times as much unreusable plastic there.
Right. Yes, it's a challenge. There's not a lot of great answers. Lonnie, did you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to see the general public get a little bit more involved in this. Mm-hmm. The customers who are ordering this food, it's been amazing to me when I have ordered food, how different, some of the restaurants are, what they're going to give back to you. You never know really until we started making a concerted effort to say, we don't want utensils, we don't want condiments, we don't want paper napkins, we don't want forks and spoons, plastic forks and spoons.
Right.
And if at all possible, we don't want styrofoam.
Right.
I think that if the public understood that this is a direction that would be healthier for us, even if what we got was a plastic bag with number 5 soup container that is eminently reusable and a number 5 dish and lid that are also reusable.
Right.
That would be, and not get all the condiments and not get the, there's a restaurant, Pepper Thai. I don't know if anybody's been there, but I'd like to give them some praise for the way they packaged their delicious food, I might add. And it was in number 5 plastic, which you and I know really isn't getting recycled, but we're talking about it as if it is. So it'd be consistent with the party line. And it wouldn't, the main thing is I think we've got to get rid of this styrofoam.
Right.
Our PSDS isn't taking styrofoam peanuts anymore. They're pretty clear about that.
Right.
So
yep.
I think if we get our public, if we made some kind of an, all the different ways of putting out an article saying, this is what you can do to help our restaurant owners. Tell them off the bat or encourage them, or maybe a signage that could go in the restaurant, if you wish not to have these things, please tell us. And then that could be a part of their website.
Yeah, I think you're kind of onto something, Lonnie, in the sense that I think one of the challenges that we've had with this process has been every time, and actually now I think there's probably more of an outcry from the public than ever because people are doing so much takeout. They're just inundated with this stuff. And so, so I think it's actually might be a really good time to maybe do a little more public outreach on it and get public input in the sense of maybe we do like a little survey or, you know, somehow do a little outreach effort to get broader public perspective, sort of like they did with Desert Community Energy. And they sort of pulled the public to say, would you pay 10% more to do this? And so anyway, so I think that's probably what we're going to need to hear to move this forward, quite honestly, because I think that everybody is very reluctant right now to put more burden on restaurants. And so I think they're not necessarily thinking about some of the advantages that restaurants could have from maybe switching away from these things. So, so again, I'm going to try to circle back with Councilmember Hostage and Mayor Kors, who were both really good about actually engaging on these stakeholder meetings. So they heard firsthand what we're saying. So anyway, so I think there's definitely two schools of thought out there, and we heard a little bit from both sides. But again, since the restaurants are the one that are going to have to implement this, I think the council members will really weigh their input very heavily. So yeah, so I think you're right. I think we need to get a little bit broader input on this and actually get a little public support behind it. Yeah. Yep.
I think that would help the restaurant owners feel like they weren't the only ones responsible.
Right.
The clientele are responsible as well.
Exactly.
And in fact, actually, to be honest with you, the idea came up when my husband said, well, they asked me if I wanted utensils. And I said no. And I thought, wow, they're cool, you know, and they're putting it out there. He's getting it back. So people don't know if they can ask for utensils or tell them not to give utensils. They just take what they are given.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I'll help you with them.
Great, thank you.
Eva, I do have to comment that this discussion is for the commissioners.
My list never went up of things to read and watch.
Okay, it was included in the package for the meeting, so the commissioners do have it.
Can everybody get a copy?
Everybody has a copy.
Oh, they do. Okay.
It's included with the agenda package.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry about that. That was my 1 PS. So, all right. Okay. So, any other comments, questions on this particular topic? Again, stay tuned. We'll see how this evolves. Again, I'll try to circle back with the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem. So, okay. Yeah, Sandra.
I'll click on that. I'm thinking about, okay, you've got something sloppy or soupy that would be in plastic kind of Tupperware type containers, or some places actually will use a screw top glass jar for soups and things like that. So I just don't see why there would have to be this exception for single-use plastic bags because you've got some liquid things that are already wrapped. So we get back into this taking plastic and wrapping the plastic and then wrapping all of that plastic and then wrapping that on a big pallet and shipping it in another plastic thing. Right. So, I mean, what would be the point of that if the why not use a structured paper bag that's going to support whatever other foods, which might also be soft foods or crumbly foods and things like that, as opposed to a plastic bag, even if it has a square insert in the bottom of the plastic bag, they're soft. So if the point of it, which I think it is to protect the food and not to have, you know, slop draining out, I think a structured paper bag is a much smarter idea. And once you start saying, well, we can use plastic bags for this, but not for everything else, it's a slippery slope. Yep. So just no, but just as far as achieving, you know, the objective of why would you want, you know, these liquid things, I would go with a structured paper bag, you know.
Or yeah, I think it really gets down to the type of container for the purpose, like getting the right container for the purpose, and for liquids, then it's a screw top or it's some sort of a lid that is sealed. So I think you're right. I think that we could certainly make an argument to counter that.
Solution.
Yeah. So
this is
Lonnie.
Just a real quick one. You know, I think, of course, we're at the deepest color for our COVID status, but I think pretty soon we're going to be getting into whatever the next color is. But anyway, I think that even now, whether you use your own plastic bag when you go to the grocery store or you use their plastic bag, you know, it's getting to be mushy, because I don't think there's any data that really supports that or ever did support it, that that COVID virus could be transmitted in that way. That was always pretty mushy. I've not heard anything since that says that is you know, that they've found that to be COVID-19 to be transferred that way. So we can start acting like we did in those respects. Now, I'm not going to make a statement about it, and I'm going to go to the health department and find out what did they think about it. But now we'd like to decrease greenhouse gas emissions. So if we could start maybe leading the way in that and say, hey, you know, everybody, this is what, you know, the state says about picking up a food item in a plastic bag or getting your groceries in a plastic bag. You know, we need to kind of start being a little more realistic about it. I'm a big mask wearer, don't worry about that. But there's some wiggle room now. We know more.
Sam.
Also, as far as materials go, we do know how long the virus can last on different types of surfaces. Plastics, it lasts about 72 hours. Cotton and other materials, considerably less. Copper, almost not at all. So what would be, you know, your paper bags are cellulose from wood chips and things like that. So that's going to be less of a chance of a transmission than plastic that could be holding, you know, if anybody sneezes or there's some, you know, respiratory spray on that could go 72 hours. So again, I think it would be really smart for food service to be looking more at papers, or even if it's like a plastic substitute, that it's actually made out of bamboo or something that is not virus friendly as far as giving a nice service. So just another consideration as far as health.
All right. Well, like I said, I did not change that element of the ordinance, so that's still in there. So we'll see how that fares. And again, I'll try to circle back with the mayor and mayor pro tem to see how they want to move this forward. But again, I liked your idea, Lonnie, about getting maybe some more public engagement on it, because I know that certainly the feedback that we've gotten from the public has been very supportive in the limited interaction we've had. So. All right, so any other questions on that? All right. So let's see, what is our next old business here?
Climate action roadmap and staff report.
Yes, another old business. Okay, so I did want to just refer you guys and just mention the report from our consultant KOA on the greenhouse gas inventory. So again, that's listed as one of our first priority projects under our climate action roadmap, is that we revisit our our greenhouse gas inventory. And so the good news is they actually finished the 2010 update of that document, and they updated the various emissions factors so that they could make it comparable to a more current assessment, so that we were comparing apples to apples. And the good news is, even though some things went up and some things went down, we pretty much came in at just about the same level as we were in the original 2010 assessment. So that's good news. We didn't go up or down, and so we're about the same place we were. So that was good. And so now we actually have
I have a lot of questions about this.
Yeah, so this is
There's some major problems with this.
So this is really only kind of a preview. They
want to know what some of the issues are. If they're going to present this information to me, they're going to have to hear some stuff back, because they're making some big mistakes. One of the things was a mistake that they made on the first one. If you don't mind, Roy, just it's not a digression, it's the point.
Sure, yeah, we didn't really talk about it under my update, so go ahead.
May I?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know, even on the first one, they don't include our landfill. Our landfill, Lambs Canyon, is not included on this. That's why we're getting rid of all these single-use plastics. It's to decrease greenhouse emissions that are coming from our landfill. But we're not telling the public how many millions of tons of greenhouse gases are coming every month and every year from our landfill at Lamb Canyon. And they're referring back to our old defunct since 2002 landfill, which is actually on Edom Hill. Now, how is it that we're doing?
So just to clarify two things. So the landfill that they're actually referring to in there was a defunct landfill that is underneath the Home Depot. So it's not Edom Hill. It was this landfill that was filled in and cleaned up and all that. So there's just some residual emissions from that, and even though it was all cleaned up.
No, there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of emissions from that.
Well, so I don't know that they did much with that particular component of that 2010 data.
Putting out greenhouse gas emissions.
It is, and they accounted for that in the report. The other thing is that they don't account for landfills outside of our boundary. And so all of those other landfills are outside of our boundary. They do account for the waste that we send to landfill. And so they have emissions factors for the waste that gets transferred to landfill. And that's what they include in that.
Well, I realize that's the justification. But the problem is that we lose one of our biggest incentives, the biggest motivator to people when we remove that kind of greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from Lamb Canyon and have been and are going up exponentially to this date. I mean, I got 2010, it was 55,000 tons of just garbage from Palm Springs was put there. That was in 2010. In 2018, it went up to 79,000 tons. And you know how much that is? That math for you guys a long time ago. A lot of methane. Work backwards and get your greenhouse gas equivalent. And we're getting off, and that would be a huge motivator.
Right.
The people
and there may be a way to convey that outside of the inventory, in the sense that the inventory is done in a very structured way, but
yes,
expand it, or we could enhance that message in some way.
That's a brilliant idea. We could say, thank you for doing this greenhouse inventory. We would also like you to add for both 2010 and 2018 what the greenhouse gas emissions would be for Lamb Canyon, even though we don't need to do that.
Right. Okay. Well, we can talk with them about that.
That would be
So,
good.
what's that?
That would be good information to have.
Right.
So
I got that just literally as we were putting the agenda package together. So I read it today. So what the plan is, I had hoped that they would be a little further along with the whole thing, but we're still collecting some data points. So my plan is to have a more robust discussion around all of that whenever they kind of complete the picture. So we may, depending on when they get that done, we'll see when that is timing wise in terms of our next meeting. So hopefully it'll be before our next meeting so that you guys can have that data and so we can have a really robust discussion on that at our next meeting. So this
before it's declared done and gone and that's it, I think we ought to have some input because I think there's some issues here.
Yeah,
having to do treatment plan a number of places.
So what we could do is we could do something like we did with the priorities discussion, and we could have a special call with the contractor and just have a conversation about it, the current data, and then that might
great idea.
So I'm happy to convene that.
Yeah. Patrick, I have a couple of, oh, sorry. Patrick, can I raise two questions or comments also on the GHG inventory?
Sure.
One thing that I think that's useful for both 2010 and 2018 and but if they could refer to the 1990 baseline, because at no point do they actually refer to that. And so I had to go back. Fortunately, I have it on my, saved on my hard drive, so I knew where to get it to. The climate action plan from 2013 had the 2010 inventory with the 1990 baseline, which was 432,136 tons of CO2 equivalent. So if they could include that, and then also whether it's 2010 or 2018, whatever it is, but include the information that's in the climate action roadmap, at least staff report, to really talk about the state goals of by 2020, even with 1990, looks like that's probably achieved, certainly with DCE, and then 40% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% below 1990 levels by 2050 in some form of graph. So that is, I think, to sort of say where we are and trend analysis. And that also raises the question that since they adjusted the 2010 numbers, do they need to go back to the 1990 numbers, or can they take the view which, because the two of them ended up being, it was one basket from the other and ended up pretty close to being the same number. I assume that they'd be sufficiently comfortable that that's the result they would get in 1990. So we can
probably so. Yeah.
Okay, you can check with them, but that's kind of where, since the sort of moving around and change the ultimate number, doesn't really matter what the sub-elements are. So they're probably comfortable with the original 1990.
I'll check with them on that.
Yeah, and then I have another question, and I think you might probably know the answer based on what the comment that you just had. Not in 2010, but in 2014, the Sentinel peaking plant opened. I checked the city map. That's roughly a couple of 100 feet north of the city limits, so it's not in the city limits. But it's kind of the point that Lonnie was raising about, what happens for these emissions. So I'm not sure if they're going to be able to sort of figure that out, or whether they look at the EIR or they take, the percentage of Palm Springs use for that. But, if it were a couple 100 feet south, that would be in our city. It's just not. So I'm not sure how they're going to sort of account for that. But obviously, with the peaker plants running full blast, there's going to be a lot of emissions that are coming out of that plant right now. So if you could raise that, sort of figure out just what their methodology is to include, to include it, maybe footnote it somewhere, so that people know exactly how that is, because it's a lot closer to the city limits than everything. It's Desert Hot Springs, but it's probably a quarter mile just north of the city limit.
Okay, I can ask them about that.
So those are my two main comments on the inventory.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
I could go on, but I won't.
All right, save it for our call. All right. So again, I will arrange for a separate phone call with them. I'll ask them these questions, but again, I'll let you guys know when that is, so we can provide them with some additional questions. So, so with regard to the larger climate action staff report and the roadmap, so we've been working through the Solar and Green Building Subcommittee to explore some of these ideas with regard to additional actions that the city could be taking. And so really that is the purpose of this staff report, is to kind of provide council with an update about what we've done, what we plan to do, what we're researching, and just make sure that they're on the same page about where we're going with all of this. And so in particular, there were a few research items that are related to emissions from homes that the subcommittee has been researching and looking into, and David primarily has been assessing kind of cost effectiveness. And so we landed on a few items that seem like they're cost-effective things and things that would be fairly easy to do. And so those things are included in here as additional research items that we think have some promise. And again, we wanted to get the council's, I guess, okay for continuing to research those, because we would need to do some additional outreach and engagement and some analysis on that to kind of make those happen, and also let them know about the things that would require a lot of effort if we were going to pursue them. And so we listed a few of those as well. So that's kind of the gist of the staff report. And I will let David, you want to chime in. You did a separate memo on this that goes into a little bit more detail about those ideas. And so I'll let you say a few words about that now.
Okay, fine. I wasn't sure whether you wanted me to do it now or later.
Yeah, let's do it now.
Fine. Yeah, because we're already on topic, and that's fine. Yeah. So if you want to look at the memo, which is towards the end of the agenda packet, what I did, and it's kind of the approach that was taken with all the work that Patrick and Scour have been doing on the plastics, is that just as many cities and counties have been adopting their own plastic ordinances, they've been doing the same thing for what we call REACH codes, which go beyond the state minimum. State sets building codes, and in our case, there's the energy code with building energy efficiency. That gets updated every 3 years. Just the update just occurred in January. But while there's the minimum, you can always go beyond that. So there are close to, at this point, 30 cities and counties that have gone beyond the state code. Generally, the Energy Commission has to approve those changes, and the Commission has been approving them. So what I did was and there's a table which actually is an attachment back in the, Patrick, if you would go back. Right. I'm sorry to sort of jump back and forth. There's there you go there. So if you get a chance to look at that, that's just from last week. And that is a list of all the cities and counties that have done what we call REACH codes, beyond code, for the things that they're doing. So I took that, a lot of materials that are there, and then what I did was I applied sort of what are all the other cities and counties are doing. How would that work in our climate zone for the desert? It's called Climate Zone 15. California is divided into 15 climate zones, and we're in 15. And there are reports that are provided for the Energy Commission for them to approve the new REACH codes. So I also, Patrick, you want to jump back up? I think that's also the annex.
Oh, the cost.
Sorry about that for you going back and forth. Oh, there we go. Great. Okay. So what this is, forgive me the footnotes, but you can sort of look at the table, is going through probably a dozen different cost effectiveness reports and then identifying the ones that have the most bang for the buck, if you will, for Palm Springs. So these are essentially what I would call on-bill benefits and costs. How much is the initial equipment going to cost you for the upfront outlay, and then over the generally 30-year life cycle, how much are you going to save? And then you see the ratio there. One point that Patrick, I will add to the footnote, but obviously it's something, it's comment that's been made. A lot of the agency workshops the last couple of weeks, that these are on-bill numbers, so they don't include the social costs of health issues that we're all dealing with, the forest burning, the trees going up in flames. So there are lots of costs, and that was also the point that was raised in the memo, once again at the back at the end, that came out last week from UCR about how this is a direct cost to the Coachella Valley because of the lack of tourism. So that's sort of the methodology of what I did. There are three measures that I identified that I recommended in the draft roadmap that Patrick was referring to, the staff report for prioritized research. Once again, thank you, Patrick, for jumping up and down. So you can see those are the underlined areas. They're cool roofs, making your roofs bounce off the sun a lot more. I and my neighbor, and I think a bunch of people already have that. They are exceedingly cost effective to make the roofs more reflective, so that the heat doesn't penetrate into your living area. Also, when you're doing a retrofit, and when it is not already required by code, in many cases you have to add additional insulation for your ductwork. But if that's not required by code over a certain threshold, and I suggested 100,000, it could be 60,000 or some other number. But for a major retrofit, spend an extra couple $100,000, you get a lot of benefit for having insulation, and also some better water insulation on that. And then the final one is not a direct benefit, but that would be pre-wiring, so that for new construction, when they're already going in and adding the wiring, they add an electric plug for cooking in your potential electric range, also for electric dryer, batteries, which a lot of people are now wanting to see, and also a slightly upgraded wiring for a potential heat pump water heater, which are becoming more prevalent now. So those are the three areas where they have the least cost and or the highest benefit cost ratio, where I would like to proceed, subject of course to council direction, with additional outreach to some builders and some other people, just to get some experience. Just to confirm these are statewide numbers, but there's some more outreach that would need to be done, research and outreach to do that. Commissioner Flanagan's raised a very good question on cool roofs. Do we have materials? Do the roofers, local roofers, have those materials that fit in with the Palm Springs architectural styles? I don't know the answer to that question, and that would be a very good example of the additional outreach that we would need to do. And if the answer is, well, we don't really have those materials that fit in with our houses, then that would drop. But that's sort of a good example of the outreach and research that would need to be done to sort of localize these statewide. So what I would ask for the commission is just to sort of, that's the approach, and we would like to recommend that we continue with that approach to council. So I don't know, Patrick, if this is a formal vote or sense of the commission, that sort of this is kind of a short-term roadmap, if you will, of areas that I want to do some more research. As Patrick correctly noted, there are a lot more actions which are a lot more involved that a lot of cities and counties have adopted. But if we want to go that route as directed by council, they'd have to bring in a consultant. So I'm not recommending those at this point. That would be further direction from council, and they'd have to, get some help for us to sort of do some of those issues. So that's sort of the request for the commission, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, essentially what I need to be able to say here is that the subcommittee identified these things, and the Sustainability Commission supported further research on these.
Patrick, and I think we can probably just do this by consensus. We don't need a formal vote.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if everyone is okay with that, then that would be great. And Patrick, I know you've got so much work, and obviously this has to go to council, but I have a very good idea of the missing, sort of the gaps. And I think I would be able to do most, if not all, of the outreach, because I know, who to contact and what the questions are. Okay. So just sort of let you know that, not at least for these three specific issues, would not require anywhere near like the kind of outreach that you're doing now on plastics.
Sure.
These are, small group of builders and other people, and I would know where to find them.
Okay.
So I think formally we should just state that we agree by consensus to move forward with these recommendations.
Okay. Yeah, thank you all very much. This is a lot of work, but this is just a question of, you know, what can we be doing? The forests are burning, we can't breathe the air. We need to move forward, and these are the things that we can sort of, you know, move forward the most quickly on. All right, thank you. That's it for me, Patrick. I've got the other things I'll get to the community report on.
It's old business. So
thank you. Thank you to all.
So I would just mention and I can talk a little bit more about this. I think that one of the things that's maybe getting lost in some of these conversations, there's lots of ideas out there to do more with regard to climate action. And there has been certainly a significant level of effort put forward to launch Desert Community Energy and maintain its implementation. So I think people need to not lose sight of the amount of effort that in itself is taking and continues to take. So, I think that's one thing to just keep in mind as we go forward with this. That is a significant action and a significantly bold action that this city took, and that it has a significant impact on our emissions. So, so I'm going to be looking forward to seeing what the projections are for that impact when we do the kind of look ahead for our greenhouse gas inventory. So hopefully we'll have a good story to tell there as well.
Yeah, the rough projection that came when council, that Tom Kirk brought to council was roughly a 27% reduction. That was pre-launch, so it may be a little bit less, but we're probably, hopefully, continuing to talk in the 20s, in the 20%, and that's a very, very large, and I do agree with you. And that's one of the reasons why these other sort of big ticket items about electrification, I'll discuss that in the DC comments, that would have to be, council would have to basically give the order to, to start firing a whole bunch of guns, and that's not what those 3 points are about.
Right. Okay. All right. That's all I have on that front.
Okay. So we move on to new business. And I think these are Patrick's items.
Okay. All right. Yes. New business. So I wanted to share with you back in, I think it was either January or February when we met, I had talked about the need to develop an ordinance to help us be able to enforce our organics and recycling requirements for commercial businesses and for multifamily complexes in particular. As you may recall, we did a lot of outreach last year around this time to businesses who have to comply with organics management and recycling requirements from the state. And basically we got some good responses. People were interested, but then not a lot of people ended up complying in the end. So, what we wanted to do essentially at the urging of the state is to develop an ordinance that essentially just reflects their state requirements, so that we would have an enforcement mechanism to go after folks if they did not refuse to comply with these laws. A slight update to this story is that I did get a phone call from CalRecycle on Thursday, and they have essentially asked us to compel people to comply with this ordinance by essentially providing them the service regardless of whether or not they ask for it. So, so like for instance, if you're a restaurant and you're generating 2 cubic yards of waste a week, then you get a green bin regardless of whether or not you want one. And so I am going to be working with Palm Springs Disposal to kind of understand how we might implement such a requirement and what the implications of that might be. And kind of work through that process. So
I'm confused.
Sure.
You lost me.
Sure. Sorry.
Where are you talking about on the agenda?
So I am talking about, so it is
current planning potential. I mean, I'm not following this here.
Right. Sorry. So
somebody else is having that problem, but
I am on. I can show you. There is. Go back to that.
Are we at new business now?
Yep, we're in new business.
Okay, all right. So we're talking about the City Council staff report, October 2020.
So that one we just talked about. That was old business. That was the greenhouse climate action stuff.
No, that is some of it.
You're on D2.
David was talking about some of that.
Yep.
Yeah, but then there are also issues in here about the green waste versus the food waste, and that is
yes.
Yes, I mean this is a proposed.
So I am on the screen here.
That's what David presented, but I think that this what is the intent as far as the green waste is concerned? There's two kinds of green waste. First of all, you know, there's the landscaping waste, and then there's food waste.
Right.
And it's not made very clear in here at all. In fact, we have an ordinance that looked like here it is. Yeah, it's an ordinance number blank.
Yep.
And it's regarding reusable foods. No, that's not it.
No, it's the one after. It's the one after the.
Okay, all right. But it's anyway. I'm having a lot of problems with that.
Sure. So let me back up. So back in, like I said, in January or February when we talked, I mentioned the fact that despite a lot of outreach in the fall to get people to comply with our recycling and current organics requirements, they were still not in compliance. And so we were asked by the state, or suggested by the state, that we get an ordinance in place that would allow us to enforce the state's organic waste and solid waste recycling requirements that are currently in AB 341 and AB 1826 are the two laws that codify the different requirements for recycling and organics for commercial businesses. So all of these requirements relate to the commercial business compliance. And so essentially this is the thing that requires a business to have a recycling bin and to have an organics management system, whether it's a green waste system for like multifamily complexes or a food waste or green waste management system for other businesses like maybe a restaurant. So both of those things have state mandated triggers in terms of the thresholds for the waste that triggers the threshold for having to comply with those requirements. So for example, if any business generates now more than 2 cubic yards of general waste a week, then they have to either show that they are exempt for whatever reason, or they have to have a recycling or organics management service in place. So that's what this ordinance is basically designed to do. It's literally the state language for these requirements. And so what we did was we just tried to put it into our code so that we could refer to that and we could enforce against that if people are in violation of it. So right now, all we can do is issue them a letter to say you're out of compliance and keep telling them they're out of compliance and then asking them to comply and then giving them tools to comply. But again, we can't do anything more than that because we don't have an ordinance in place. And one of our biggest challenges is quite honestly is multifamily complexes.
Yeah.
They often come back with an excuse about not having enough space or something like that. So a lot of them, some of them don't even have recycling bins for their residents. And so that's something we definitely want to correct. And one of the things I talked to our planning folks about was two things. So one was making sure that we update our planning code requirements such that they can accommodate bins for green waste, for recycling, and for solid waste. And where they have capacity issues because of parking space requirements, because of planning requirements, we want to make sure that we accommodate changes to their parking requirements such that it would accommodate the expanded bins. So that's something I've been talking to them about as well. So that's really the impetus behind this ordinance. And I wanted to share.
Not just green waste.
What's that?
It's not just green waste.
It's not. It is green waste and food waste.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's all organic waste. So it really depends on the type that you're generating. So
well, the blue waste wouldn't be organic. The blue waste is going to be recycled plastics and paper.
Exactly. So the recycling is recycling, but the organics includes green waste and food waste. So.
Yeah. Well, do we even know where we're taking it and what the purpose is? I mean.
For which? For the green waste?
Yeah.
Yeah, we know where we're taking it.
I mean, you know, it doesn't make any sense. And as far as actual food waste, that's even, I don't think we should demand anything of anybody until we have the location and how it's going to be used and how it's going to be put into biogas. And
well, I mean, we have outlets for food waste and for green waste right now. And there is more capacity coming online this fall. So
what is that?
There's a new facility that's coming online that Burtech, I think, is starting.
Oh no, that's not the one at Edom Hill, is it?
I don't think it's at Edom Hill.
Oh God! So this is the one. This is the one that. So there was no consideration made for wastewater treatment to be taking food waste from the downtown. This is the same thing.
It hasn't even entered the discussion where it's going. So this is really just to get something on paper that we could actually ask people to do this and have some I don't know, some authority behind that.
And to align with state requirements, as you said.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and so this is just the current requirement. It is not 1383, which is coming out in 2022, which is going to include residential, which is really where the capacity issue and question is going to really come into play when we start expanding it to that. So, so this really has nothing to do with where the stuff goes. It really just has to do with the fact that people have to collect it on site. So like I mentioned, the state is very adamant that we be in compliance with this law by the end of next year. And so again, we're going to be working with PSDS to kind of develop some sort of a strategy for outreach and for incentives and for all kinds of other things to make sure that everybody that can comply does comply. Because they're looking at this as the precursor to SB 1383, which will be the even bigger organics management requirement from the state. So they want to make sure everybody's complying with the existing law before the new one comes out. So that is where we are. So I wanted to point out a couple of things in this ordinance. So one thing is that the trigger, the current trigger for compliance with this law is 2 cubic yards or more of commercial solid waste per week. So that is not a lot of waste that's generated. So it used to be 4 cubic yards per week. And so the universe just potentially got bigger in terms of who needs to comply with this. So that's another thing that I'm working with PSDS to figure out, is to determine how you know, how many new businesses are going to have to kind of figure this out? And what is the implication there for their compliance? So, so we're kind of dealing with that, and I've included the new 2 cubic yard requirement in here in this ordinance to reflect the new state direction. And then the other thing that is in here is the, it's called AB 827, which actually came out late last year and requires businesses to have collection containers for recycling and for organic materials that people consume on site if they have to comply with this law. So in other words, it's not just good enough that they collect things in the back of the house, but they also need to have collection bins in the front of the house if people manage their own waste. So like if you went to Townie Bagel and you got a bagel and they served it to you in a paper bag, then you either have to have a recycling bin out there to take the paper bag, or you have to have a compost bin or some sort of bin that collects that organic waste. So again, I think this is another part of the law that most businesses are not paying attention to right now, especially because there's so little dine-in. And so this is going to be another educational moment for a lot of businesses out there. So yeah, Lonnie.
The reason why I'm asking about specifically the food waste is that when food waste, for commercial food waste, is recycled through your wastewater treatment plant, it starts us with the assumption that it will need to be sorted. Mm-hmm. And that you can't count on somebody at the commercial end doing that sorting. Because what you need is a raw feedstock that is 99% carbon. Mm-hmm. So that's how it works, is that you've got to, I can show you the schematic. It's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. It uses it employs a number of people, and those people are sorting through, and there's a truck of stuff, and it's all taken down to the wastewater treatment plant and put in a higher volume sort of wastewater treatment plant. And with all the oil and the carbon, et cetera, they put out a very high quality of CNG or whatever you want. But we've got our system. We just have to throw some money at it. We've got to get some money for it. Mm-hmm. And then we don't have to worry about these. I'm not going to go bug these people downtown. I realize that Chris is taking that stuff and dumping it in with the organic stuff that he takes to the greenway, the landscape waste. That's what he's doing with it.
I don't think so. They go to separate locations, those two things. The green waste goes to a different location than the food waste. So, and if you look at,
because that's what he's told me.
If you look
the peels of the citrus fruit laying there for months, the same peels, and how little they decomposed. This is not a place where you can't even do composting here. Mm-hmm. Nobody is composting on that level here. You have to have you have to be able to break it down using the bacteria and what's the name of that? Shoot. You've got to be able to get to a high enough temperature so that it gets the bacteria that work on it to be able to produce greenhouse gas. You want it to produce greenhouse gas, then you want to be able to use it. Mm-hmm. But the process doesn't have to start with people sorting it out downtown.
Well, that's the one thing I'm going to talk to Chris about, because we have to have a plan in place for managing all of these organic, green food waste. And so I think the system that they have right now is fairly limited.
Well, it's a pretend plan, because it eliminates a huge potential for Palm Springs.
I'm not arguing that there are opportunities out there for us to do something like this.
Yeah.
but that is not the purpose of this particular ordinance, is not to address that aspect of the problem. This ordinance is really designed to get people to comply with the law. And so, again, we're going to be working with PSDS to figure out a lot of the other components of this and of organics management in general as we move towards 1383. And so that is part of the larger discussion that we'll have around these issues. But this ordinance is basically just to put in place something to allow us to enforce the law that the state has dictated. So.
Didn't you say that we have to be in compliance by the end of next year?
Yes. So yeah. So the thing that they're asking us to do essentially is to make sure that we are at 100% compliance with this law or these laws by the end of next year, because at the end of next year is when 1383 will kick in 2022. So, yeah.
Even with having COVID, I think a lot of this stuff would be reworked and rethought out. COVID changed everything, and we're acting like it didn't.
And in what way would it change this ordinance?
I think it needs to, just like the single-use plastic has been ramped out now to July, whatever, next year. We need to do the same thing with this kind of we need to really get down into the nitty gritty, not just put a Band-Aid on it and pretend that it's fixed. We've got to be serious about it. And even if it's not fixed right now, we can say, well, this is what we've done. And we're going to not waste our time with stuff like this. I mean, we had COVID, and now we're really working on the hard stuff. This is a waste of time, I think. That's just my opinion. And I don't know, is it Cal Recycle that's twisting our arm here or what? Yeah, okay, I thought so.
So it's been, quite honestly, a real struggle in engaging with the state on these issues and SB 1383 in particular. There is no room for discussion with regard to moving dates or kind of meeting people where they are. There just seems to be a really strong mandate to get it done. So,
have you talked to City Council about what you faced with this?
So that would be part of honestly our staff report. That would go along with this to kind of just explain where we're at. The other thing I wanted to make sure that council understood is that this law and the need to comply with this law is going to hit the same people that we're hitting on the plastics front. So we're going to be asking them to do a lot in the next year. So not only are we asking them to rethink their disposables and reusables and all that, we're also asking them and making them essentially have all of this organic stuff in place and recycling.
And provide their own containers.
Right. So that would help them a lot in terms of working with this.
I mean, I thought it sounds like PSDS is planning on giving them containers, and they have given them some.
Right. So we're going to have to look at each person. So this is another thing that I want to do in the new year, I think, is that I almost feel like with all of the things that are going on, we need to do almost like a sustainability assessment for every business, to meet with them, to see what they do, to see how they do it, to give them resources, to give them technical assistance, to give them financial assistance, to help them come into compliance with all of these things. But I think it has to do with this. It has to do, if that plastics thing goes forward, it would have to do with that. It has to do with perhaps energy consumption. Lots of people concerned about their energy bills these days. So anyway, so I think there's a whole campaign that could be done around outreach to these businesses to help them comply, as opposed to kind of enforcing the mandate part of it. but rather helping them kind of move along into compliance and through assistance methods. So that's where my head is. So this is a backstop if we were to need that, but really my goal would be to reach out to people and have them understand that this is important and that we're willing to help them get there by providing some sort of incentives or financial assistance or whatever that may be. So.
Yeah, it's hard for me to do that and be dishonest about what's actually happening with the waste that they're producing and doing such a good job collecting and sorting. It's not being used other than to produce more greenhouse gas emissions someplace else.
There's cases in the past of here in California of when we stopped doing backyard incineration. That was difficult for some people, but we accepted it. And then when we had to separate our garbage and you had to put it in colored containers or have plastic bags, these were things that people adapted to fairly quickly instead of just a metal can and all your trash went out there. It didn't take people very long to make that adaptation. So I wouldn't underestimate people, you know, the public's and customers and businesses' ability to do this. But I do think that, you know, the trick is to engage and to make it based on education and all of the good reasons why we want to go forward with this, but not make it punitive or something that's being forced on them. It has to be purposeful and that people, you know, share that.
It won't work.
And it's education, you know.
Yeah. It's education and infrastructure.
We all separate our garbage now, and I don't know anybody who incinerates. In fact, it's against the law. I'm just saying it can be done, you know, and we have to do it.
Even incinerating your garbage in the backyard?
Yes.
Kidding, because that's the worst.
Every house had, all those houses had incinerators in the backyard. Anybody, any boomers here, I'm sure you knew it. And then the day came, and then they were all taken away. You know?
Talk about air pollution.
So
we did that in Massachusetts when I was growing up.
Right, my grandfather burned his trash all the time. So, and then,
yeah, but it wasn't good, right?
And honest to God, we used to throw it over the railroad tracks. I had no idea. So,
we used to burn.
So I want to kind of close this conversation. So with regard to this ordinance language, I want to just make sure that see if anybody else has any questions about it. Because I want to move it forward to council so that we can get it on the books so that we can start moving this forward.
And we take a vote on it.
Yeah.
Patrick, if I just one point, I think for the staff report,
sure.
just to make sure that the council understands that multifamily residents are included in the definition of business.
Yeah,
because the ordinance talks about business all the point, but when you read the definition, it also includes, it's somewhat, well, more than somewhat counterintuitive. The business is multifamily residential, i.e. everything but single family homes. So that's a big ticket item for the reasons that you discussed, but I think it's worth highlighting in the staff report so the council doesn't sort of skip over the definition and realize that business actually doesn't mean just business.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you.
So do you have anything else to present, Patrick, or should we take a vote?
Take a vote.
So we really need a motion to approve this draft ordinance to take it forward to City Council. Would somebody like to make that motion?
Carl will move to take it to City Council.
A second?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chair Clark.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Rob. We've had a lot of discussion already. Is there any more discussion before we take the vote? And I think this is not optimal, but I think Patrick has made it clear that we're under a lot of pressure to comply. This is just a mechanism to help us to comply by the end of next year. And certainly there's a lot more work that needs to be done as we go forward, especially with 1383 coming in.
Question. When is going to be our next opportunity to work on this? Are we letting, we're letting it out of our commission and it's a done deal as far as we're concerned?
I
We
believe
want our input. Do they really want our input on it? Because I'm done with it. I don't think it's going to be very good for the community if it goes through, but I think a lot more could be done with this. So, but I'm fine to vote.
Patrick, you're muted. Patrick, you're muted.
Sorry. I mean, I'm happy to do more with this. The goal was to really just get something on paper so that we could be in compliance or enforce compliance with the state law. And so when we go beyond the state law is when it gets a little bit more tricky in terms of, you know, are we asking people to do other things? In which case, all right, then we're going to get into this whole stakeholder engagement loop. And again, that's fine if we want to do that, but we're going to be doing that significantly when we go through with 1383, which is going to be next spring. We're going to start that whole ordinance development process. So, so again, this is really just the basic nuts and bolts that people have to have a recycling container in if you generate more than X quantity, because that's the state law. So. Yeah.
Doesn't PSDS supply that container usually?
They do. They always do. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And for food waste too.
For food waste, they are the service provider for food waste. Yep. So.
Are we ready to vote? You have the motion in the second. So,
second.
Yeah, Rob made the second.
Second. What? I'm sorry.
Rob already did it.
Okay.
Okay.
He beat you to the punch.
We got double seconds.
Right.
I'm sorry.
So I think we can do this by voice vote. So all in favor, we say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion passes.
All right.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. All right. So the only other new business item was EV charging stations. We did, let's see, I worked with, I'm sorry, back in March, there was a staff report that was developed by planning to streamline our EV charging permitting process in compliance with the state law again. And so that topic was pulled because of COVID. That's when COVID hit. And so we've asked planning to bring that back to the table, hopefully at the September meeting. And so I'm kind of keeping an eye out for that, but that's going to be coming back to their consideration. And I don't see any problem with that passing. Again, it's to comply with the state law requirement for facilitating that process. And then the only other thing on new business, we were going to talk a little bit about formation of an ad hoc committee on strategic planning and general plan update. So as I think I mentioned on the last call, we had planned to update the sustainability plan in 2021, which is coming up. And so the integration with the general plan is kind of important. And so we wanted to have a small group of you help out with trying to think through how that integration happens, how we should update our strategic plan, and what that might look like in a more integrated environment. We had a little taste of that with the general plan priorities discussion, I thought, which went pretty well. So we wanted to just have a committee that we could go to for more forward-looking conversation around strategy and future priorities and things like that. So that is what that is about.
Patrick, I'd like to be part of that committee. There's a lot of stuff, as I mentioned. that's driven by climate change and the state requirements. And all of these working groups have a lot of materials. So saves you and David time that I can send a lot of materials on these issues. So I'd like to serve as a resource for that because it's really important. So if that's okay,
Sure.
I'd love to be part of that group.
All right.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to be part of the group?
I also would like to be part of the group, but I'm wondering, since I term out in either January or February next year, is that too short a time frame for this?
Well, you could also participate as a member of the public. If you
I could. Okay.
Yeah. Rob, it's June for you.
Is it June?
Yeah, don't be so hasty.
Yeah.
I'd like to participate as well.
Okay. Great. All right. Anyone else? Okay. That's great. And so again, we'll think through as a subgroup and we'll bring stuff back to the committee, full commission and all that good stuff. So, so that's good. We can kind of get started on that maybe October timeframe. So start talking about it. Great.
That then finishes new business and move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports. I'd just like to do a little bit of a time check here. It's almost 7:30. We probably won't go as long as the council normally does, but we're running close to our normal limit. So I think we've covered some of the things in the subcommittee and commissioner reports already, so we can probably go through them pretty quickly, but let's move on. So the first one is the Standing Subcommittee on Solar and Green Building. And
I will be quick because there's a lot we already discussed and it's in the report, which is in the package. So 2 points is I've started working on the statewide REACH code working group, and SC has invited me to participate in a webinar on the 29th, September 29th, 2 weeks from today, from noon to 1. So to talk about the work we're doing here in Palm Springs in that area that we just discussed. So I'll send Patrick, I have the draft invitation, I'll send you that, and then they'll send you the formal invitation with the Microsoft Teams links when that's available. So I'll start the link to that. And second point, hot off the press, as part of the work that I did a few years ago on the Soul Smart program where we got a gold designation, Patrick and I have a call scheduled on Tuesday afternoon with National Renewable Energy Lab, part of the Department of Energy, and that's to discuss a solar permitting app that they're developing to see whether that would, we can use that as a way of speeding up the solar permitting process. So Patrick and I will do that and we'll report back and obviously coordinate with the building division. That's it for what I have for green building solar that has not already been discussed.
thank you, David. The next is the Standing Subcommittee on Waste Reduction.
Yes, so sorry I forgot to include that report in your packet, but I sent it around to everybody. And the only other thing I'll mention is to just reiterate, SB 1383 is coming, and we are really focusing with PSDS on trying to get ready for that. And our first big task is to probably renegotiate their franchise agreement. And so we're going to start that probably the month of October. And then that will lead into the ordinance that we developed that reflects 1383 requirements. And the state has finally released the tools, the assistance tools for all of those things just today. So hopefully we have some templates we can work with and that kind of thing. So that'll be helpful moving forward. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. The next is Standing Subcommittee on Environment. Jennifer's not here. Is there anything that Sandra or Greg have to say? I know that we didn't have World Environment Day, obviously, but there was an art contest.
There were some virtual local art initiatives that they were able to do that primarily through Jennifer and through her contacts. It was very disappointing though, because we had really put together and we had some wonderful support. So unfortunately, virus kind of interrupted all of that. So, but we did make a showing, and we're there on the map. So hopefully next year we'll have a more rousing showing and maybe be able to realize some of the contacts that we were able to make this year. So
thank you, Sandra. Next is the ad hoc subcommittee on Earth Day, and what we put in the agenda here was proposing to dissolve the current ad hoc subcommittee because there really shouldn't be any action this time of year, but then to create a new ad hoc subcommittee early in 2021 for Earth Day. Is that acceptable to everybody? Carl?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, so I don't think we need to vote on it. We'll just say we're dissolving it and remove it. We'll remove it from the list for now. Next is the ad hoc subcommittee on walkability and pedestrian planning.
Yep. So as we speak, or as we spoke, the contractor was doing a little briefing for 1PS to give them a little update on the project and let them know that it's starting and that we will be engaging an advisory committee here in the coming months. I met with the subcommittee last month, and we talked through some of the outreach materials and some of the fact sheets and that kind of thing. And so after the meeting tonight with 1PS, we're going to do a little communications rollout for that effort and share the fact sheet and other materials. And so I'll send that around to the group. So you guys are in the loop on that. And but otherwise, we're probably looking at starting advisory committee meetings maybe in October timeframe, kind of later October. And then really having them start some analyses and virtual engagement in that timeframe too. So that's the plan. And as you saw, it kind of aligns nicely with things that are happening with the general plan in terms of circulation and safety, two topics.
Thank you. The next, the ad hoc subcommittee on crosswalks and pedestrian safety. And that's something that I actually had set up to go along with the subcommittee on walkability, particularly the Safe Routes to Schools master plan, because there had been interest in the Code Enforcement and Public Works committee to participate in that. Really, we haven't met or done anything on it. And I think the way Patrick has set up the advisory committee, the way he's explained it in the past, really eliminates the need to have this separate subcommittee. So I'm recommending that we dissolve this subcommittee for now.
Right, so I'm the only one on that, it seems like, but at our last meeting, I asked that I be added to the Walkability and Pedestrian Planning Commission, and so I'm not on there yet, but I'd still like to be on that.
Oh, right.
Instead.
Sorry, Jim.
That's okay, but I think we should dissolve this other one. They seem to be combinable.
Yeah.
I think we can do what we intended. And part of it was to include Christine from Code Enforcement and Public Works. Mm-hmm. But there will be opportunities for that committee to be involved and make input. So we'll dissolve that. The next is the ad hoc subcommittee on bicycle routes and cycling.
And we don't have anything to report.
Okay, thank you. Ad hoc subcommittee on night sky.
Okay, am I muted or am I?
We can hear you.
Okay. So I just a very, very brief point here that I'm going to the Palm Springs Municipal Code, and there is actually a chapter 93.21.00 for outdoor lighting standards. And the purpose of this chapter, quoting here, is these regulations are intended to maintain ambient lighting levels as low as possible in order to enhance the city's community character and charm and maintain dark skies. So last night, I did a little bit of a field trip. I went up to Tahquitz Canyon, between roughly the airport and Cerritos. You're probably all familiar with this area. This is where there is uplighting of all the palm trees in the center median along there. And I have an app that actually measures the light for these uplighting lamps. And it came in at about 23,000 lumens per lamp. Okay, now if you actually go back to the chapter, the chapter says that all luminaries with total lamp mean lumens above 4,800, as opposed to the 23,000 I measured, shall be full cutoff type, except for the following uses: lighting used to highlight architectural features, landscapes, building facades, fountains, etc. So that sounds like the city is off the hook, except there is a subsection A right below that that says lighting luminaries intended to be directional as described in paragraph 6 shall be furnished with total lamp lumens of less than 4,000 and must be furnished with shields. So here's my point to this. We are a long way from getting an ordinance together for dark skies in Palm Springs, but an obvious first step would be to start talking to the city about getting in compliance with its own standards and stop violating them. So, so Patrick, that's my action item for tonight is, can we get together with city employees and start to move on that?
You can feel free to meet whoever you want. So I guess that the best people are the maintenance people. I think it's the facility folks that would be responsible for that. So, and it maybe the engineering folks too, I don't know. So we should, why don't we do this? Why don't you put together a little memo that describes the problem, and then I can shop that around to see who we should invite to that conversation.
Very good. Good action item.
Carl, I have a question. Does this have a time limit on it? Does it say, until 10 p.m. or anything like that?
No, it does not. There is a reference to a curfew-like time frame in the standards documents, but there are no actual times specified.
Okay.
If I could also raise a point, the building code does regulate for new construction lighting, and the proposed 2022 standards are even stricter. So this is an issue that's being looked at as a statewide. So that'll help a little bit, assuming that the building department actually looks at that, or planning, that someone actually looks at the code. I think planning does, because I've heard it raised at planning commission meetings, but the code is getting stricter for 2022, i.e. it would go into effect in 2023.
So okay, just to follow up to your point, David, I suspect that given that the city's in flagrant violation of its own standards right now, that this is just not an issue that anybody is caring about. And I suspect that even new construction and new lighting is probably violating. So we just need to raise awareness of this somehow.
All right. I'll offline, Patrick, I'll send you just some of the, I'll check this and I can send you hopefully a quick and dirty on some of those things.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, move on to water conservation.
Okay, New York Minute Water Conservation, DWA, once again, the State Department of Water Resources, actually Water Resources Control Board, is making them change the method of calculating the water savings. In the past, it's been based on how much water is consumed, i.e. from your meters, and starting next month, it will be based on how much water that they produce, i.e. that's including all of the leaks that they have. And unfortunately, there's some leaky pipes because they're so old. So that's likely to reduce their water savings numbers, which so far have been good. Ending out the period where they've been making the calculation from the 2013 baseline, it's been roughly almost an 18% water savings cumulatively over the last 4 years since June of 2016. So they've done a good job, at least based on the metric that they've used. We'll see what those numbers be, but people should continue to save water. That's one point. And second is EWA is working with a consultant to get some state funds under what's called SCHIP, Self-Generation Incentive Program, to put batteries up at a couple of their pumping stations up in the hills. And I'll address that a little bit more in when I do DCE. That's it for water.
Thank you, David. The next is wellness, and I'll jump in quickly because I've been reporting on the smoking ordinance. The last time when we met in July, I reported that I had contacted Rhonda Hart, who's the person of Human Rights Commission, and they had expressed interest. Well, they had written their own draft ordinance, and I asked if they had any interest in working with us when we actually started working on the ordinance. At that time, Ron said there had been no interest, but he had 3 new commissioners joining, and he expected that he would bring it up at their next meeting, which was last night. I did contact Ron today and haven't heard from him, so I will try to keep in contact with him. But one thing we don't know is when the city would be interested in taking this up. But we probably should, keep working on it at a low level. Carl, do you have anything you want to say about that?
Nothing to add.
Okay. And anything else on 3450 campaign? That's something that's we've talked about.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's sort of aspirational more than anything that could be mailed down to a to-do list, because it's so grand in scope. I'm not sure what would be the procedure to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, it's just public, it's informing the public is all you can do, basically. And then people can choose on their own.
So an educational campaign.
Yeah, campaign.
Well, we'll keep it on the list, and at some point, perhaps can get more involved.
Okay.
And lastly, we have Desert Community Energy Community Advisory Committee.
Okay, I will make this quick. I've been spending a lot of time attending all of these webinars and conferences. I think Patrick or Daniel had circulated the Solar Valley Conference, which was yesterday. So I attended that, as well as a workshop run by the Energy Commission and the Air Resources Board of the PUC earlier this month on SB 100 on electrification of the grid, or decarbonization of the grid. So just a couple of points, a lot of work being done at the state agencies. The themes of all of these various events are the following: electrification of the grid, buildings and transportation sector. Buildings we looked at, transportation, Patrick is already doing with the EV charger, so that's great. Grid reliability to ensure that the lights stay on in times of high demand, which we weren't able to do, as well as an emergency such as earthquakes, fires, floods, and winds. And Patrick's also working on an SCHIP application. And finally, equity to ensure that disadvantaged communities are no longer unfairly burdened by polluting power plants in their neighborhoods, can fully participate in government energy programs, and get workforce training that lead to long-term living wage jobs. Largely, these are DCE issues that are already covered by programs at some of the more established community choice aggregators up in the area. And as DC works to establish its reserves, I'm working with staff to see what programs we can adopt here, and just in the interim doing some preliminary research working with them. So stay tuned, some work for the city, and largely what the DC can be doing.
Thank you, David. So the final thing before adjournment is our commissioner comments, and particularly looking for suggestions for the upcoming agenda. We normally call this going around the table. That doesn't really apply. I'll just go through the list on the top of the agenda of commissioners and ask if anybody has any input. First one is Rob.
I do actually, if I can get on the agenda for our next meeting to give everybody an overview of the work I've been doing on recharging Talkeets Creek, I think you would all find it quite interesting.
Okay, got it now. And actually, I wanted to ask you, I think I had learned that there had been a cancellation of the request to convert Bel Air Greens, and I never got a confirmation on that from planning. Have you heard about
yes. Yeah, the request was officially withdrawn in July, I believe, and none of us have been able to find out why. But we suspect basically that the community outcry against converting Bel Air into condos and development was enough to get the owner to get cold feet, because he started to realize that he was going to have a real battle on his hands right from the Planning Commission on out.
Okay. Thanks. Carl, you have anything?
Nothing to add, Roy.
Thanks. Jim?
No, nothing to add. Thanks, Roy.
David?
Sorry about that. Nothing else. Nothing else that I haven't already said. Thank you.
Sandra?
Yes, a subject near and dear to my heart. A bit of good news when there's a lot of not so good news is that there was a federal overturn judgment against Dicamba. So this is a huge victory, big news. Also related about a dozen other bee killing and pollinator pesticides. The federal ruling has been changed, so those are now off the market. And the lawsuit against glyphosate, aka the primary ingredient in Roundup, is going forward. So the state of California is backing this. I'm hoping that we can continue with this. It certainly becomes a problem with the ag workers and ground crews and that in an age of COVID, where they're already at increased risk. So yeah, if we could continue with our poison campaign, that would be terrific.
Thank you, Sandra, for reporting back. Greg?
Nothing.
And Lonnie?
We had that discussion during one of our last meetings about adding air to the city's planning as one of the features of our planet that we have to be concerned with. And I don't think it has been any more clear than it's this summer with all of the fires. I'm kind of going back to Commissioner Baker's wellness subcommittee, thinking about how we really don't have, like LA has, a really good public monitoring system would show our air quality index. And a little bit of education that would go along with it. Because we have some of the most polluted air in the country. And what I see on the little map that you get in the Desert Sun about air quality, it doesn't tell you anything, basically. I mean, if it's moderate, do you know what that means? I mean, most people don't. It sounds not so bad, but actually it's bad for about 50% of the population. Moderate.
So what would your suggestion
be? Beginning. Pardon me?
What would your suggestion be on that?
Well, what I'm suggesting is, like,
your phone tells you the air quality. So right now it's 90.
I'm not getting it. Carl, what is that? Oh, it's the air quality index on your phone?
On your earphone, it says air quality in 90, quality moderate. So it does give you a measure.
Yeah.
But is it taking a reading right from the phone, or is it coming from a website?
No, it's coming from whatever site they use, typically the airport.
So I think Lonnie's point is let's get more local and more a larger number of actual readings of our air from local sources.
Those services exist, and I depend on them myself. I'm ozone sensitive, And since the beginning of lockdown going forward, we haven't had one day where we haven't been in an orange, which is medically unhealthy air, not like just you know, fungus and hay fever type of things, but ozone, which most of the air reports don't even report on. So we haven't had one day under the orange. We've actually been in a high maroon before the fires. And this is ozone and particulate matter. So we have a high at-risk demographic. And a lot of people move here thinking you're going to have better air quality. And the reality is it isn't. And we haven't had one day that hasn't been in the low orange. It's not acceptable.
So Lonnie, do you have a suggestion for the agenda for the next meeting? Something you want to discuss?
I think I'll pass on it for now.
Thank you for bringing it up. I see the reports on the news, but they don't really say much.
No, and I don't think most people understand exactly what it means from a health standpoint and from the demographic and in terms of just environmental justice. It means a lot. And I think it's a way that we could, if we could show the map through the whole Coachella Valley, it would educate people a little bit about environmental justice, because it's so much worse in the East and the South Valley. But it's terrible here because we've got the Banning Pass. It's, you know, you're saying that, if I'm understanding you correctly, Sandra, you're saying that you haven't noticed it being that bad?
No, what I'm saying is it has been all bad. Bad.
Oh, yeah.
Bad. And it's actually gone into color codes that we haven't experienced. Right? Oh, no. But they don't mention you. And the ozone is very dangerous. And of course, this affects children.
Well, and mixing it with COVID too. So I just feel that I would like the Desert Sun and maybe something on our website that could show people, but I think it's going to take some educating as well. But like, for instance, the LA Times has all of the metropolitan areas are color coded, and it starts to get really sucking over towards us. We're in that area. Not as bad as Long Beach, but you know, it gets to be that way. So I haven't seen the LA Times picture lately, but I'm sure that Palm Springs is in the red. So it's important for people to know that they can't just try to function like nothing's going on, because it's a very serious problem for people's lungs and heart, and it's a problem in and of itself.
Even without the fire smoke, it's been a very, very bad air quality all summer.
Exactly.
I would just point out that we did add, and I'm not sure, I think Lonnie, you're on that discussion, at our recommendation, the Planning Commission did add the word air in our priorities. So I think, you know, and Chair Clark, I think you were part of that discussion as well. I think it's your suggestion to get in the word air. And as I mentioned, the safety element does have to deal with climate change resilience and adaptation. So I think that's good.
Right.
And once again, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to participate in that working group, to make sure that we actually cover those issues in the general plan. I think that's a good sort of, you know, admittedly long-term, but that's something we should be working on in the details of the general plan and of course our sustainability plan.
Thanks, David.
Okay. So thank you for the input. And our next meeting will be on Tuesday, October 20th at 5:30. I assume it's going to be Zoom again. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Thank you, Greg. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Rob. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Have a good night.